Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Phillip Siddiq Show. We have these two dynamic guests. Central Park 5 is the film. We have the director extraordinaire. You've seen him, Ken Burns. And what do I say, the star or
Subject.
the subject. The subject of the film. Let me get it right. Raymond Santana. Thank you. Now, guys, tell us about it. And, Ken, you've directed so many documentaries. Why did you think you needed to make this particular one?
Well, actually, this is something I've co-directed with my daughter Sarah Burns and her husband David McMahon. And my daughter Sarah wrote a book and had been in contact with Central Park 5. Raymond is one of the Central Park 5.
Yes.
And when I was reading the early drafts of her book, I realized this was going to be a really great film as well. And we decided to make a film, so we've worked really hard at doing that.
Right. Now, Raymond, looking at it, because I remember I grew up in that time and seeing all this stuff, but I was only looking at the 180 degrees, front to back. You, 360 degrees. How was that for you going through all of that?
Well, it was very frustrating. You're 40 years old, and you have no outlet, no one to talk to, no one to say we're innocent. Nobody believes you. It's like the whole world against you. You don't really know what to do. It kind of goes over your head.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And everyone, this is before MySpace, Twitter, Facebook, all that, which if something happened like this now, you can get on and tweet about, okay,
That's right.
check this out, DNA, da-da-da-da-da, so this was just crazy. And then the terminology, wolf pack, wilding, and being on the West Coast, we were like, what's going on here? Wolf pack, wilding, and the movie will stir you for sure. Putting it together, what emotions came up through you to see this now? Have you seen it on the big screen?
Yes, yeah. The first time I saw it on the big screen, we was in Toronto. We was at the Toronto Film Festival, and to actually see it with a live audience, I was speechless. Because I went through so many emotions, watching the film, and then also to feel what the audience is going through. People when they're crying and people upset.
Yes.
It was very emotional. But also, it told that our story was reaching out. It was getting heard. It was going in the heart. What people were feeling. They were connecting with it.
Yes.
So it was great, also in a sense.
Now, Ken, were you there with him in
I
the film,
yeah.
and your daughter there?
And Sarah and her
Dave.
husband Dave.
Yes, okay.
We were all there, and what Raymond left out is that the audience gave him a standing ovation as he came up for the Q&A, which left him sort of speechless. And someone afterwards said it was our way of trying to apologize, because I think, as Sarah says about the film, she heard about this case, 10 years ago and got angry, and she hopes that people get angry about this film. This is really a miscarriage of justice, and the fact that even though they've been exonerated, even though their convictions were vacated at 10 years ago, the city has still not settled a suit that they've had against them. And while that's not part of our film, it's telling a factual story of what happened. What we've been able to do in our telling of it is extend some humanity to people who were denied it by those very phrases that were used. The wilding and the wolf pack, turn them into one-dimensional, two-dimensional villains, which we all bought hook, line, and sinker. So it wasn't just errors of the police, errors of the prosecutors, it was errors of the society through the media that poured gasoline on this and made it into the crime of the century. And it was a horrific crime. But how interesting that in the end, they can't still admit their mistakes, and the person who did admit the mistakes, the only reason why we know what actually happened is because the actual rapist confessed, and is his DNA linked him to the crime and no one else to the crime. And so finally the city reinvestigated and had to decide that the five had done nothing. But this is after they'd served their full sentences. It's just a horrible story about that kind of resistance. We know what it's like when it's hard to say I'm sorry, or it's hard to apologize. But these people who have their reputations, they think, at stake, as they should be, they made huge, glaring errors.
Yes. And I'm certain, back in that time, they say New York City needed a win.
Yes.
It was like round up the usual suspects and then just do what you do best. Just cajole them, tell stories, and like I said, you're young. You don't know. And looking back with the eyes of 2012, I'm sure you're going to have people, well, why didn't your parents do this? Why didn't you get a lawyer? But, you know, tell us how, you know, you can't do that.
Yeah.
You know.
People don't understand. Even in the movie, you know, when they talk to the juror, and the juror tells you how he was under so much pressure from his peers on the jury panel that even he said, you know what, I just want to go home.
Yes.
You know, so let's just, I made up a story, I made up some cocky excuse, and I said guilty. So even he felt the pressure.
Right. I mean, it's like most folks on a jury, you know, I want to go home.
Yeah.
You know, I want to go home. And when you were chronicling even the timeline didn't fit.
Right.
You know,
No,
how did
there
these
should
guys
have
get
been-
from here
there was
all the way over there?
A dozen obvious mistakes that the cops could
Yes.
have picked up, starting with the fact that this guy assaulted a woman 2 days before on April 17th, 1989, and a young detective had tracked down his name. They knew who it was, and suddenly it got, you know, forgotten about. And then he went on after April 19th to rape again and to murder a pregnant woman. So all of these things could have been stopped if people did their jobs. If the prosecutor said, something stinks here, there's no DNA match, maybe we ought to go back and test some theories.
Yes.
They clearly didn't know where it took place or how it took place or what she was wearing. So maybe this was these professional homicide guys working on these 2 14-year-olds, a 2 15-year-olds, and a 16-year-old. And they're saying, look, we know you didn't do it, but this guy's saying you're doing it, and if you just say that he did it, we'll let you go home. And you go, well, I want to go home. It's been way too long. I haven't seen my dad. I haven't seen my mom. You know, I want to go home. I want to go back to school, and whatever it is. And you forget that you're in a circular firing squad. That all you're going to do is the other guy's doing the same thing with you, and all of a sudden they come out and say, thank you very much. We have the guys who did it, and we're very happy to say they confessed. So slam dunk, you know, high fives all around. Only it wasn't what happened.
No, it was not. And I mean, I watched it in anger because, as I mentioned before, I grew up during that time, and looking at it and watching it, it's like, I remember that time, you know. I remember, you know, looking for all these guys. Okay, this guy, he looks like he, bring him in, and it wasn't even the guy, you know. It wasn't even the guy who did this. Like you said, the guy who confessed finally. Oh, man. And DNA didn't even match. That was the other thing. I'm like, you guys got to be kidding me.
It's a bloody crime scene. There's nothing of the crime scene on the boys, and nothing of the boys on the crime scene. So, I mean, that alone should have been, how come, you know, you've got some evidence, and it turns out to be this guy Reyes who confesses. 13 years later, you got it, and if you'd done your job 2 days before, you would have had it. So.
Right. Yeah. So what's going on?
It's a good story to see.
Oh, it's an excellent story to see, and especially for all those of us who were during that time growing up. You know, you only got the news from 4 or 5 different sources, as opposed to today, you can get it just on a smartphone. You know, and it was filtered to those guys did it. Burn them, kill them, do what you have to do with them, you know, and everything else.
Yeah.
You know, so you guys like, this is just crazy.
Yeah.
And even out here on the West Coast, people began to, you know, even today, I may get in the elevator, someone, you know, they grip the purse.
Yeah.
Still today.
Of course.
You gotta be kidding. And then finally, you guys like exonerated and everything else, man. I mean, it was just crazy. Now, Ken, working with your daughter, what was that like for you, working with, seeing somebody with your own DNA?
What was interesting is that we felt that it was the 5 of us that really worked on it, the 3 of us who directed it and produced it and wrote it, David McMahon and my daughter Sarah and myself. We also had an editor and an associate producer, and we were the Central Park 5, and they were the Central Park 5, and we just felt like we had banded together under common purpose. It was really great and thrilling to work with your child, who's such a remarkable human being, and my son-in-law, who is equally so.
Right. Now, my friend, how was it working with them? How did they, quote, gain your trust to say, hey, we want to do a story on you, and how did you feel, well, look, man, you guys just go away or something?
Well, you know, we met Sarah back in 2002. You know, when we got exonerated, she worked at my civil attorney, Jonathan Moore's office. And so she wanted to write a paper on us. And so it was, you know, no harm, fine, she could write a paper. And we kept in touch throughout the years. And she did a lot of research. So, you know, you start to gain her trust because you knew that she was coming from the truth. And so then she proposed, well, let's do a book. And we was like, great, because nobody else is asking to do a book, and you're the only person who wants to tell the truth. Yes. And that's how we went. We never knew Ken Burns was her father. You know, she never put the, you know.
Right.
We just, you know, this is Sarah. That was it. And so when it came to the point where she said, well, you know what, let's do a movie, the trust was already there. So it was automatically, we trust Sarah. Sarah's going to do a great job.
But when you found out that's okay, oh, my dad's name is Ken Burns. I mean, what was that feeling
Well,
like?
I
didn't know me.
I didn't know.
Oh.
You know, who's Ken Burns?
Yeah.
You know, he's just a great, documentary. You know,
Yeah.
and I'm like, oh, okay,
Civil War, the best.
Yeah, you know, yeah. But you know, great film. He did a great job.
Okay, all right. And for you, Ken, I mean, you follow overseeing your daughter, how she's doing it, and then when she brought it up to you, what did you think?
Well, she was writing her book, and we were reading the first few pages, and I just said, wow, we ought to make a film of it. It'll be very different. And so she and her husband, he's been working for me for the better part of 14 years. It was just sort of logical. So it was not a question. And it's themes I've dealt with. It's the themes of American history, of race and justice, of freedom, of integrity, of character. And we felt it was important to share the character of the 5 people whose character was never allowed to be voiced in this film.
Right. I mean, you guys are like, what, 13, 14?
14 years old.
Holy crap. I couldn't imagine, I mean, myself, quote, losing that amount of time and how you had to grow up fast.
Yes.
I mean, sheesh, man. So,
Well, thank you for that.
you guys have, I mean, I'm still a little angry. We're talking off screen. I
Yeah.
think they saw me sweating and said, okay, well, the time is rolling, because I was getting all worked up about the film. I mean, if you have a soul, you cannot help but get worked up.
Right? No, you
That's
should.
right.
You should
You
be
know,
angry by this story.
And that's what we want.
Yeah.
We want you to be angry. We want you to go out there and voice your opinion.
Yeah, and
Tell them
it's
how you
the
feel.
truth.
And it's the truth.
That's the thing. It's the truth. It's not, well, we'll shade this over here and cover that there. No.
No.
This was like the bare, naked truth.
That's
man.
right.
So I'm glad you guys came on the show. Believe me, man.
Thank you.
Ken Burns.
Thank you.
Raymond Santana. Thank you, guys.
All right.
Thank you.